Hi, I'm Michelle Jorgensen with the Mount Mahogany Ward's Self-Reliance training videos. I'm excited to be back today. Last month we talked about water storage and we talked about why that is the most important thing to store. So I hope you have everything ready that we talked about last month because that was the January goal. Now we're on to February. February is short-term food storage. So the church has given us a recommendation for what we are supposed to store, and they've said three things. The first is food, short and long-term food. The second is water. You already got that one checked off the list last month. And the third is financial reserves, and hopefully you've been working on that as you go along. So let's go to food, short and long-term food storage. We're only going to focus on short-term today because that is the most useful in any kind of a short-term emergency. So short-term food storage is foods that you typically eat. If you don't eat a lot of wheat, I've had people tell me this. They say, I have all of these things of wheat stored in my basement, but we don't eat wheat. So what am I going to do in an emergency? So in a long-term emergency, we're going to talk about that next month. In a long-term emergency, you're going to need wheat. But in a short-term emergency, there probably are some other ways to store things. So instead of wheat, perhaps you should store pancake mix. It's the same thing as wheat, but it's in a much usable form. If you are typically storing beans, you can store this kind of beans, which is great, and I actually use these in our normal diet, but a lot of people don't. If you don't use these in your normal diet, your gut is going to be real unhappy with you when you start feeding it this. So from a short-term food storage perspective, this is a lot easier. It's a commercially canned bean that you can open the top of, put it in a bowl. Even if you don't heat it up, you could eat this, and it would be a good source of energy for you. So short-term, this. The other thing is, a lot of people have milk stored, and a lot of people use milk on a regular basis. So you can have powdered milk, but this kind of milk may be something that's more usable. So I hope this gives you an idea of how long-term and short-term food storage differs. Short-term is things that you can open a can and use it right now. Anybody can open a can. My husband often says this. He says, if we have some kind of an emergency, you better not die or get injured because we're all going to starve if you do. You're the one who knows how to cook all of this. He can open a can. He can do this. My kids can do this if he can. So this is the kind of thing you need for a short-term emergency. So there's some principles behind short-term food storage. A big one is these are foods you need to rotate because these are not long-term storage foods. These are not foods that you're going to have in your storage room for 10 to 30 years. These are foods that you need to rotate probably within the next couple of years. So make sure they're foods that you are going to be using. So if you have beans in your typical diet, make sure they're beans you're going to eat. Make sure it's things that your family enjoys already because you need to rotate through them. There's ways to save money. That is always a complaint or concern that I hear when people talk about, gosh, I wish I had food storage, I just can't afford it. So here's a couple of ideas for how to make it affordable. Case lots. So if you look on these cans that I have, these are not name brand cans. These are store brand cans. And these are cans that I got in a great big case during a case lot sale. So I'm going to list on that Steak website, newsletter website, I'm going to put all of the case lots that are coming up in the next few months so that you can make sure to hit them as they come along. I will get a case of tomatoes, beans, refried beans, corn. Think of the things that you could make a meal with fairly easily, even if all you did was open a can. Chili, those kinds of items. And those are things that you'll rotate through as you use them too. So that's a way to save some money. The other way to do it is if you are already buying something, if you're already buying peanut butter, buy 2 instead of 1. If 2 is on your list, or if 1 is on your list, buy 2 today. It's only going to add a couple of dollars to your grocery bill, but now you have 2. Now you have short-term food storage along with the food that you're ordinarily using on a day-to-day basis. The other thing that I recommend is buying in bulk. There are a lot of ways to buy in bulk, and for me, some of my favorite things are places like, if you've never heard of Alpine Food Storage, everything comes in bulk there. In fact, they have vegetables in bulk on a daily basis, and I'll put links for how to find that. That's an easy way to do it. A lot of grocery stores like Winco or Macy's have bulk bins for things. If you buy things in bulk, you're going to save money. The other way I do it, and especially for vegetables and fruit, is I buy on KSL. I know that sounds crazy, but KSL is literally my favorite website in the world, and I buy a lot of food on KSL. There's a home and garden section on there, and they have fresh produce. So when people are having so much in their gardens that they can't see straight, they will sell it to you for cheap or free. This spring, you could not literally go on there without finding places just giving away apricots because we had such a big apricot harvest this spring. So if you want food to store inexpensively, what's better than free? So that's a great place to check, and I check there weekly. I'll just go on there and see what people are giving away. Right now it's pumpkins and squash because that's that time of year. So there's a lot of ways to do it for an inexpensive way. Where do you store it? That's another concern people always have. Where in the world do you put all of this? So you have to be a little creative. In fact, we joked that we had to do a bloopers about this. Where do Mormons store their food? You know, be a little creative about it. Underneath beds. Like I'd said in last video, what else goes under there except for your dust bunnies and your socks, you know? So put some food underneath there. There's a quote from a general authority that says, if you really knew what was coming, you would stack the food storage in the middle of your living room, you'd put a blanket over it, and you'd use it as your coffee table because it's that important to have. So if space is an issue, just figure it out. Stack it up in your closets, put it underneath your beds, put it in your nooks and crannies, clean out some junk that you have and put it there. There's places. Don't let that be the reason that you don't store food. The next thing that I always talk about is variety. It's going to get really, really old really fast if all we eat is chili for weeks on end. So make sure you have a variety of foods. These are foods, these aren't long-term food storage items, but they're short-term food storage items. And these are things that you can rotate and use on a daily basis. So these are things to have in your storage. You can find these on really good discounts and deals. Make sure you have some home canned foods if you do home canning. These are things that really can add variety to your diet because this is fruits and vegetables. Drying is a great way to preserve it. These are some dried tomatoes. So a little bit of this added to that can of beans that I had will make those beans taste a lot better. Just to add a little variety. Salsa makes everything taste better, so salsa is a great thing to store as well. So make sure you have a variety, that you don't just have 15 cases of one type of thing. The other thing you need to think about storing is mental foods. We call them mental foods. So in any type of an emergency, we're going to be having a hard time. We may not be very happy. Kids especially may not be very happy. So store some stuff like this. Now, I don't eat this on a typical basis in my home, so when anybody gives this to me as a gift, it goes in the food storage and I hide it so my kids can't find it. So these are things that we're going to want, though. We're going to want some things like this as a treat during difficult times. So make sure you store some mental foods. My kids have probably broken into my stash by now, but that's what we do at our house. Another thing that you really need to make sure you do is high energy foods. I know we can store tomatoes and beans all day long, but they don't give us a lot of high energy. And even if you're not a big meat eater on a regular basis, you're going to need a source of protein and a source of fat because that we may not want it right now, but that's what's going to keep us alive and keep us having energy in an emergency. So, you know, tuna, chicken, peanut butter is a good source of that. Beef stew. Make sure you don't buy too much so it goes bad if you don't eat it regularly, but if you do eat it regularly, those are good things to include in your storage as well. The last thing I want to talk about is ways to make food taste good. Again, if you have not eaten beans and rice for every single meal heading into a disaster, you're not going to really want to eat it just plain that way either. So make sure you've added some kinds of condiments, you know, dressings, things that make things taste good, spices. Those things are important to have as well. Powdered soup mixes or even just soup that you can add to things. You know, you could add this and this together and that could be a dinner. So just think a little bit about variety. So short-term food storage is about foods that we could eat easily, quickly, may not even have to heat if we had to do it for a couple of days, that my husband, my kids could do, anybody could do, and these are foods that we rotate through. So we keep them, we use them, we just are used to them. So in an emergency, food isn't a big deal because there's going to be a lot of other things that are big deals. So that's short-term food storage. Next month, we're going to talk about long-term food storage. That's probably what you know more about. So hopefully this month, you'll get this tackled. Go to some of those big box stores, buy things in bulk, check out case lot sales, get things in your storage under your bed, wherever it needs to go so that you have food. If you are without food for a week or 2 weeks or a month, this could even just be a job layoff, something of that sort where you didn't have money flowing through your home for a couple of months. Make sure that you wouldn't be worried about feeding your family in some kind of a short-term emergency. That's it for today. Make sure to check back next month for long-term food storage. Thank you.